Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about climate change, which is not a topic I've touched on really too many times over the last 8 years of doing the Conscious Resistance, but something we're going to focus on today. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to get all of our latest content and to follow us on Minds, which, by the way, I'm starting to use Minds again because Minds finally has scheduling for pages. So those of you who run pages, you know how frustrating it is to not be able to schedule and to have to constantly be on social media to post something. Well, they now have scheduling. They also accept crypto payments. So I'm going to start using Minds more often again. I'm still on Steemit/DTube. I am also on Discord if you want to join our channel. If you want to get text updates, sign up for Remind.com. Of course, some of you are watching these videos on BitChute, and I appreciate that. And for those who want to support, please join Subscribestar or Patreon.com/DerekBros. And just a reminder, we are running our Support the Future of the Conscious Resistance Network number 2, which is a crowdfunding campaign. I'm aiming to raise $2,000. I've been running this already for a week, and I've only got $60. I have 6 days left, and if any of you out there are supportive of my work, supportive of the documentaries I've done, we have a 5G documentary that we're working on right now. We will have a part 2 of Epstein coming up in a few months or so, by the end of the year, I hope, as well as my new book. You also know that I'm campaigning for mayor to try to spread the ideas of self-ownership and to wake people up to 5G and to wake people up to a lot of different things. I'm making weekly YouTube videos. I write articles. I've got books. So I'm not just asking you to support me or to invest in me because I'm sitting here at home in my chair talking, news and politics on YouTube. I do a lot more than that. Some of you out there, you do good YouTube work. That's what you do. That's fine. But I hit the streets. I hit the pavement. I go out there. I travel. I interview people. I talk to people. And the only way I can do that at this point in 2019, going into 2020, the only way I will be able to survive another year of this is with your support. And I'm just going to keep saying it. You can, like it or not. This is the reality we're in. Content creators, journalists, independent journalists who don't want to play the mainstream game. The only way we're going to survive is with your help. So please check that out. All right, let's get into this. So, in the news, Greta Van Thunberg has been all over the place. Greta Van Thunberg, of course, is the young, I believe, Swedish activist who has been gaining traction and momentum in news because she walked out of school. This is the story we're told. She walked out of her class and skipped class because she was so upset and frustrated about the environment and climate change, and basically said, what's the point of an education if the world isn't going to exist? And that's the mentality that's being adopted by a lot of younger kids and teenagers right now at the moment. So let's just hear Greta, what she had to say. Of course, it's all over the news right now.
It's all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away?
All right, so there you go. Greta Van Thunberg, of course, she's making the news everywhere. Before we go any further, into Greta, I wanted to show you. So she started the movement more than a year ago, and it's been popping up. And now there's the Sunrise Movement. There's the student climate strikes that are taking place. You guys have seen through my mayoral run that I've been going to. I went to an environmental justice forum. I was at a student climate caucus. I went there because I want to see firsthand what these kids are being taught and how they're, promoting this message. The interesting thing, climate protests bring gridlock to DC morning traffic. This was just yesterday, and on Friday, this past Friday, there was, climate strikes all over the country, and they're getting mass coverage. There's, they're just highlighting the fact that these kids all over the world are participating in this. And okay, maybe that's news, right? But when's the last time that the news reported on the march against Monsanto in a favorable way, or anti-war marches, the march on the Pentagon, or any of the marches and the movements that they highlight. Obviously, they highlight things that are going to be big, like the women's marches and stuff like that. But I guarantee you, if they really want to black out something, the media can and will. And we've seen this before. Somewhere, remember years ago, veterans, including Adam Kokesh and others, led a Veterans for Ron Paul march on the White House. And there was thousands of veterans out there, and they turned their back to the White House and did a saluting. And, that was a pretty big thing, and they ignored that. I can select other examples and find other examples where they've ignored. My point is here, I think that we have to be suspicious, or at least skeptical, in the media is choosing to highlight something. Climate protesters bring gridlock to DC morning traffic. And this is one I found from a while ago. The anger, the growing power and anger of climate change voters. And so what they're saying here, and I think there's some truth to this, it's saying for the first time in a presidential cycle, Democrats have a mainstream candidate who ran a campaign centered on climate change. The voter passionately motivated by climate change was once something of an anomaly, but President Donald Trump has systematically unraveled the nation's environmental regulations, which is true. At the same time, Americans have witnessed a series of climate-related crises, or at least what we're told are related to the climate. Fires in the Amazon, hurricanes, and we experienced that down here in Houston, record-shattering temperatures and weather events across the U.S. So all these things are being blamed on climate change, and all the climate change actions are in response to what they see as inaction on the part of the adults and the politicians. And of course, you got to have a little bit of Trump in this. Trump mocks teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg. So keeping her in the news, right? Trump could just ignore this 16-year-old little girl, but instead he talks about her, and that gives the news and media something else to talk about. Goes back and forth. And let's revisit what she said. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. People are suffering. People are dying. And, when you look up the term climate refugees, which is people because of the changes in the climate or the weather, and again, whether this is because of greenhouse emissions or because of geoengineering and climate weather modification, it is true. There are people who are having to move from low-lying areas. Even here in Houston, I keep telling people during this mayoral race that we have to accept we live in an unsustainable city, that we live at or near below sea level, and that it's not just going to change overnight, that if people really want to, if there's any indication that the climate is going to continue in this direction, and again, whether that's because it's man-made or because of geoengineering, things of that sort, either way it's man-made. One way it's man-made because of cars, they claim, and because of cow farts, or the other one it's man-made because of some, crazy people are engineering it with weather modification, things of that sort. Either way, we can either accept that it's man-made and the government is the answer, because that's the thing. As I told you guys, I've been going to these forums and these events to try to understand where the students are at. And you can see right here, I went to the Environmental Justice Forum this past week, and there were students from the Student Climate Strike that asked questions. You can kind of hear me answering them. I was at St. Catherine's Montessori Student Climate Caucus. Again, the same thing. The students spoke to the adults for about an hour, and then they gave some of the candidates a chance to speak and answer a couple questions. But the kids pointed out to this room full of adults and said, yes, taxes are going to have to be raised, and yes, you're going to have to deal with it because you screwed up and you didn't do anything, and now we're going to fix it. And so that's the message that's being put out of there. And like I said, it's being accepted and kind of crammed down our throats everywhere on CNN and all the mainstream press. Now, one could argue, well, of course, this is the biggest issue people have ever faced, and all these young adults are upset, so it deserves to be covered. And yeah, that could be true, and it is true on one angle, one element. But at the same time, we have to understand, and this is the saddest thing, I think, that just like usual in tyrannical, totalitarian governments and regimes, the children are used as props and as pawns. Hitler had the Nazi youth, the communists have their youth brigades. There's always an effort to indoctrinate the youth into any kind of political message or propaganda. And these kids are being told from very young age that the world's going to end in 12 years if the adults don't do something. And in fact, the reason that we're at this point is because the adults have done nothing. And as Greta von Thunberg, she expressed a real feeling of saying, my childhood has been robbed, my dreams are gone. This is what these kids, they're coming into this like existential crisis at a very young age, and they're dealing with the fear that comes as a result of that, right? So there are people who are legitimately upset and afraid. And I think those are what we would refer to as, and I say this delicately, the useful idiots, the useful pawns, who are maybe not thinking as deeply or critically or questioning authority around them. They're just accepting the things they heard. And again, to be completely clear, these students at this Student Climate Caucus are extremely intelligent. This is not just some, low-income school. This is a Montessori school with kids who are very well educated and obviously can recite and remember facts that they are told and that they read, but they might not be thinking and questioning deeply enough, I think, to challenge those systems around them. So Greta is the example that many of them are inspired by. I hear them refer to Greta at the caucus and at the climate strike. So I want to point you to this from the website, thewrongkindofgreen.org. And this is Act 4 in a 5-part series, I believe, called The Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent, The House is on Fire, and the $100 Trillion Rescue. So it's a pretty long, each of these 4 out of the 4 pieces, 4 parts is extremely long. And I recommend looking at it. It's worth your time. I'm going to include that in the link. But I'm just going to say it out front. Greta von Thunberg her family has ties to the same industries that benefit from pushing this idea of, climate change is here and the end of the world is here. And as I said, the kids are being told the government is the answer. This is why, once again, friends, I'm going to these things, not because I completely 100% buy their climate agenda. Obviously, I consider myself an earth warrior. I care about the planet. I care about permaculture. I want to be a steward of the earth. I want to work to be in balance. But I think it has to be done in a voluntary fashion. And I also am suspicious of the purposes and the methods that the mainstream uses to push their climate agenda. I don't buy into it 100%, but I can't even say that at these forums, because if the topic comes up and I don't, at least seem to embrace, because I care about the pollution, I care about the climate, but again, we might have completely different solutions. And that's what I keep trying to talk to them. I keep planting seeds about individual liberty and about permaculture and decentralization. That's why I'm going there. For those of you who are like, what, Derek? He's over there at the climate change thing. I know some of you might not get it, but I'm trying to get into every avenue I can, because these kids are being indoctrinated by someone like Greta Thunberg, who her family has ties to industry that you need to look into. And the people who are pushing this message, I do believe they have an ulterior motive. One of the folks who are often brought up is the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome is one of these elite groups that's supported by the United Nations, former and current heads of states, high-level politicians, government officials, diplomats, scientists, economists, and business leaders. So sort of like a Bilderberg-type group, founded in 1968, stimulated considerable public attention in 1972 with its first report, The Limits of Growth, and it's based in Switzerland. Now, The Limits to Growth, okay, this is the book where the quote is from one of their other books called The First Global Revolution, that conspiracy theorists, quote unquote conspiracy theorists, often pull their ideas from. So let's take a look at this quote and then decide what we think it means. So one aspect of the First Global Revolution, it says, historically, social or political unity has commonly been motivated by enemies in common. So they're talking about how states sometimes will create an enemy to create unity. Quote, the need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. Some states have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by blaming external enemies. The ploy of finding a scapegoat is as old as mankind itself. When things become too difficult at home, divert attention or to adventure abroad. Bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or else one invented for the purpose. With the disappearance of the traditional enemy, the temptation is to use religious or ethnic minorities as scapegoats, especially those whose differences from the majority are disturbing. So they say, they kind of lament that the disappearance of the traditional enemy, the temptation is to use religious or ethnic minorities as a scapegoat. However, every state has been so used to classifying its neighbors as friend or foe that the sudden absence of traditional adversaries has left governments and public opinion with a great void to fill. New enemies have to be identified, new strategies imagined, and new weapons devised. And here's the most controversial quote. In searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality, in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat, which must be confronted by everyone together. But in designating these dangers as the enemy, we fall into the trap, which we already have warned readers about, namely, mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention and natural processes, and it is only through changed attitudes and behaviors that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. So let's really look at what it says, because I know some people see that and they're like, oh my God, right there, they say the enemy is humanity and that's all, it's over, everything's, that they need that's the proof we need to know that they want to kill humanity. But let's look at what they say. Okay, so they said pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages. So pollution is definitely a problem. Water shortages are definitely a problem. Famine is definitely a problem. The threat of global warming, now let's just take that as the words, what they mean. Global, the entire earth. Warming to a certain degree that we can't exist. All of those things are true threats. And they're saying, taken together, they seem to fit the bill of creating a common threat which must be confronted by everyone. However, they say all these dangers are caused by human intervention and natural processes, and it's only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. I agree with that. It's only by changing our attitudes and our behavior and our actions can these problems that we face on the individual as well as collective level be overcome. And then they say the real enemy is humanity itself. Now, I might have phrased that and say, well, the real enemy then is apathy. Because the real enemy is that humans are so apathetic. Because let me just put this to you guys, and I've kind of talked about this in some videos, but let me just put this out to you guys. If we came out today with a study, let's say it was completely independently funded, and we know that we trust the sources and everything like that, and this study found that in order to save humanity, people had to stop eating meat. And they said, look, we don't want to do this by force. We're going to do it voluntary. Everybody, we'll do this within 5 years, phase out meat eating. And, those of you who do it first will be incentivized in some way, right? Like maybe they come up with some non-statist, super threatening way to encourage people to stop eating meat, if that was a solution, right? How many of you would actually do it? How many of you would actually even take that initiative and say, you know what, I'm going to do this for the good of the planet or for the good of my people, et cetera, et cetera? I don't know too many people who would, because this is the thing. Humanity and apathy are the problem to some degree. Even if we're presented with the perfect solution, a non-state solution, a voluntary solution, I know that some people still choose not to. That there's so many people who, misunderstand how we can take care of the planet and how we can work on the world around us, and that we can be the ones to lead the change. So to some degree, humanity is the problem. But I do think that it's not just that humans exist. It's not just that, there is this thing in humans that's causing us to destroy the planet. It's something, for one, the fact that we have people manipulating world events, but also there is an apathy that I've seen within humans that I've tried to suss out and to, turn into inspiration for years. But so many of you are apathetic, and because of that, I think that it gives the powers that wish they were the justification to take power, and to take power and say, look, we are going to have to do this by force or, by choice. And now you end up with young kids like Greta Van Thunberg who are out there basically saying, we're going to tax the crap out of you. Yes, it's going to cause, new laws, new bureaucracy, et cetera, and you're going to have to deal with it. And this is exactly what these organizations like the Club of Rome have been pushing for generations. They've got so many people to believe now that humanity is the problem. And I hear this at the Student Climate Caucus, at the Environmental Justice Forum, people who basically say that we are the problem. And so what's the solution then? Well, the United Nations pushing geoengineering as the last-ditch effort to save humanity. I wrote this last October 2018, so just over a year ago, and it's only gotten more and more blatant since then. In their new report, the United Nations is sounding alarm bells about the need for controversial climate engineering technology. And you guys know this. I've covered this extensively. I'll put this article in the link below that discusses some of the problems with solar engineering, geoengineering, and weather modification, the problems of that. But that's where we're going to. They're saying that it's, that's the solution. I wrote this one back in 2015. New study says Earth is experiencing sixth mass extinction. And this is one kind of the major points that I want to bring to your attention. You go down here to the second part of my article. Is humanity the problem, or can we be the solution? Without a doubt, the Earth is suffering. The planet is ravaged with environmental disasters, loss of important ecosystems and species, and a population that seems increasingly ignorant to the impact it is having on the rock they call home. Every free mind should work to live in harmony with this planet and reduce the impact of our existence on this beautiful, unique place we call Earth. That is without question. What we should question, however, are the motives for governments and other parasitic classes who promote the idea that humanity is the problem that needs to be corrected. Indeed, Professor Ehrlich, who I talked about earlier in this article, Professor Ehrlich, who is one of the researchers who's now saying that we're moving into the next sixth mass extinction era, Professor Ehrlich's involvement with this study might set off a few alarms for those who are familiar with the topic of eugenics. Eugenics is the belief that humans can be improved through genetic or social engineering. In 1983, Ehrlich wrote the book Extinction, the Causes and Consequences of the Disappearance of the Species. Before that, he co-wrote Ecoscience, published in 1977 with John Holdren, who was the Obama administration's science czar. Ecoscience promoted a number of radical ideas for dealing with the world's population. Some of these include forced abortions enforced by a global police force, which require the loss of individual sovereignty. Pretty radical stuff indeed. Here are a couple of excerpts. On forced abortion, page 837. Indeed, it has been concluded that compulsory population control laws, even including laws requiring compulsory abortion, could be sustained under the existing constitution if the population crisis becomes sufficiently severe to endanger the society. One way to carry out this disapproval might be to insist that all illegitimate babies be put up for abortion, especially those born to minors who generally are not capable of caring properly for a child alone. If a single mother really wished to keep her baby, she might be obliged to go through adoption proceedings and demonstrate her ability to support and care for it. Adoption proceedings probably should remain more difficult for single people than for married couples, in recognition of the relative difficulty of raising children alone. It would be possible to require pregnant women, single women, to marry or have abortions, perhaps as an alternative to placement for adoption. He also discusses poisoning the water to force fertility control. Adding a stimulant to drinking water or staple foods is a suggestion that seems to horrify people more than most proposals for involuntary fertility control. Indeed, this would pose some very difficult political, legal, and social questions, to say nothing of the technical problems. No such stimulant exists today, nor does one appear to be under development. To be acceptable, such a substance would have to meet some rather stiff requirements. It must be uniformly effective, despite widely varying doses received by individuals, and despite varying degrees of fertility and sensitivity among individuals. It must be free of dangerous or unpleasant side effects, and it must have no effect on members of the opposite sex, children, old people, pets, or livestock. Holden and Ehrlich write about the need for a global police force. If this could be accomplished, security might be provided by an armed international organization, a global analog of a police force. Many people have recognized this as a goal, but the way to reach it remains obscure in a world where factionalism seems, if anything, to be increasing. The first step necessarily involves partial surrender of sovereignty to an international organization. So, Robert Ehrlich, this guy is not just some random dude. Like, Professor Ehrlich is not just some random guy. He is the one, Paul Ehrlich, excuse me. He is the one who's been promoting this. The population bomb. He wrote ecological doomsday, things like this. So he's been pushing this for years, and in fact, some people are calling him out. The National Review at the time accused Ehrlich of pushing an ecological doomsday, something he's been accused of in the past ever since he wrote his book in 1968. And although his book, The Population Bomb, was a bestseller, the ideas have been largely discredited. At the time, he said that by the early 2000s, the population of the United States and Britain would be starving en masse because of their increase in size and consumption. So, does that mean that there's no problems in the earth at all? Does that mean there's no reason to want to take care of the planet and to want to reduce our waste and to want to learn about permaculture and to want to learn to be growing our own food locally and to be more in balance with the planet? No. All of those are worthy causes, and I encourage everybody to learn more about them. But as I've shown here, I think there are reasons to be suspicious of this movement. And if you need further proof, I do recommend going to my friend James Corbett, hit the Corbett Report, and to search climate change as I have done here, and just to listen to some of his shorter presentations as well as his longer presentations, and even 10 Climate Myths Busted, that's 5 years ago, Geoengineering, the real climate threat, IPCC Exposed. I mean, there's some really good ones, as well as watching his documentaries, How Big Oil Conquered the World, and, part 1 and 2 of those. So they definitely lay out the agenda, the bigger picture. So I do believe the earth is going through changes. I do believe it's important to protect the environment. I do believe that we should do it in a way that is voluntary so that governments don't have any sort of justification, which is what they're looking for, to take sovereignty and to take power from us and force some sort of green eco-fascism on us. But if we do nothing, if we stand by and just contribute to the destruction, then it's only inevitable that they will force this on us. So I think that's it. I think I've said everything I need to say. I want to remind you guys again to support the Future of the Conscious Resistance Network. If you can donate anything to help me keep going, if you appreciate this report, please consider donating, investing in my work. And you can do that through the crowdfunding campaign. You can do that through Patreon. You can do that through Subscribestar or any other way you like. I also have crypto wallets right here on my invest page. But that's it for now, guys. Be skeptical, be smart, think with your heart, think with your mind, love everyone around you, and remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.